Okay, hi guys. We're gonna run through some of the functionality of this new monitoring project. So let's log in. First thing we have to do is choose a dashboard. I set up some dashboards already. So let's look at a couple of databases running Swing Bench. If we look at the first default view, we've got kind of traffic light status. If we want to see a bit more that's happening, we've got an activity viewer. Let's open them both up. So in our activity viewer we can see the active sessions at every second. We have another level of the viewing on this. If we open it up a bit to the expanded view, we can see the top SQL and the top sessions for this time period that we're looking at. While I'm just looking quickly through the base screens, another nice thing we can do is we can select a range on the graph, and this range of time will then will populate our detail panels as well. So if we wanted to see what was happening around this time, we can see that the sequels that had completed and the one that's still running, and we can see the breakdown of the sessions for this time period, and what the session was running and what SQL it was running and what locks. If we wanted to see what happens a particular second, we can just click on a second and we can see the three sessions that were running, the three blocks here, and what they are. So we've got an idle blocker, a session that's blocked, and a session doing sysio, and we can actually see the locks that each session held at that time. So we can see that one of our sessions was blocked by 121. We can even go in and see what 121 was and what it was doing at that time. So that was log writer, and we can see it was waiting for IPC message. It wasn't running any SQL, it was an idle blocker, and we've got the p values as well. If I look again at selecting a range, and we'll look again at the session drill down modal, so we'll see what this session was, which is obviously the biggest session. And so we're showing it for the sample range that I just selected. This is running Swing Bench, so we can see that it was through JDBC, and it was warehouse orders. And what we can see is for the time period we selected, how much time it spent on each event. We can also see the time it spent running each bit of SQL, and also if it was blocked or not blocked. If we wanted to see a bit more when maybe we had the log file sync, we can click on this segment and we can see the time that it was waiting, what it was waiting for. We can see the locks that it was holding at the time. If we want to see when it was running this bit of SQL, and we can see the event. So running this SQL obviously is user IO. Maybe we'd like to see the 2 seconds it was blocked, and we can see that it was 121 which was blocking it, and it is holding some locks but they weren't blocking. On the front screen here we can have a quick view of SQL it was running, the event breakdown. So we've had a quick look at the session drill down. If we wanted to see, if we go back to the top SQL that's running, so we've got a panel here of top SQL, and we can see that for that top SQL in the selected range we have an average active sessions of 0.69, so 70% of the time it was running. We can see what it was running, we can see that it's still running at the last second, we can see that we've completed 6 of those on the last session. Another one here, we can see for that range that we've run almost 400 of this select products one. If we want to have a more detailed look at what the SQL was and what was doing, we can click on the SQL. This will bring us up our SQL modal, which again it shows us for the highlighted range, so for debugging and finding out what was happening at any range. So we picked a rather small, but this is what we want to look at. You can see that it's currently running at the end of this period, that we've had 30,000 execution starts, and we've got elapsed time, CPU time, and then these are our totals and per execution, buffer get, physical read. We can see the child activity for the selected range, but it was just running child 0, otherwise we'd see more, and we can see the plans if it was changing plans. We can then see how many sessions were running this query in our selected range. This is a one session swing bench, so generally it's just be one. We can see what the SQL text was, and then we can have a look at the SQL plan. So the plan for child 0, which is selected here, and we can see the details of the plan. We can also see the axis predicates just by highlighting, and we also have the filter predicates if this one had any on, but it didn't. All plans, but we've only got one plan hash value. We can see the details. If we had lots of plans, we'd be able to see which was the best. We can see all the children. And then another nice feature is we've got a breakdown for every 5 minutes in history. So we can see if it was busy during a different time, if the average seconds went up, plus other metrics which we might be looking at, and we can see that it's still picked the same plan hash value. We can flick through. Now we can go back into real time now, so this is running for the current period. We could even shrink it up, look at what's happening currently. Let's just start it running again. Now what we could also do, or what's interesting, is if people said we had a problem yesterday or whenever, we have a time period. So if we wanted to go to the 24-hour view, we can click on this, and what this gives us is then a 5-minute aggregated summary of the data. So we can see all the ones that are running, and then also this top SQL and top sessions is also over the 24 hours. So just in one click for the last 24 hours we can see what our top SQL were and what they were doing, user IO, a little bit of CPU, and how many was running in that 24 hours and what they were. And we can see the top sessions. Obviously we've got one constant session because we've got swing bench, and we can see what SQL that was running, that session was running. We can even go in and see the event breakdown for the whole 24-hour period, all the way down to what happens per second. Now this is then our 24-hour dash panel. We also have yesterday and the day before as well. If we see something out of the ordinary, well, we'll have a look at this. This is our top worst performing 5 minutes, or busiest. So we can actually click on that session and we go into the per second view for that period that we just selected for that 5 minutes. And so we can see that we actually had 2 quite busy sessions, well 3, and we can see that we were, so if we wanted to see what was happening here, or well actually over this whole period, we can then see what SQL was running at that time, what the sessions were, whether it's one bit of SQL or one bin run a lot. We see the sessions, we see that this was all user IO. Oh, okay, actually this is what we have. This is slightly interesting. We have, that's why it got busy, we have scheduler running a job. This is what, seeing what was happening overnight, and we have sys kicking in with some of its maintenance stuff. We can see when it was blocked and not, and then we can go straight back from this view to a run-in view. This is our swing bench 2 sessions, so we can see what was happening, see all the time, look at the 24 hours. Well, look, swing bench just runs continually. If we want to have a look at this is a database I set up for a demo, which is basically long running queries, so what we would see if it was just one query running for a long time. We can see that it's one query running here, occasionally 2. And if we want to see what happened there, we can see that we've got 2. What's our first one? So this one takes 1 second. It's just a made up query. And the longer one, we got a per execution of roughly 10 minutes. And we can see for the sample period that we've got 1 session generally running. We can see when the execution is completed in the 5-minute periods. So that's what it's like with more of a decision support case scenario rather than our OLTP, the swing bench test. If we were monitoring table locks, if we want to see how table locks would look, so this database that I've set up, they're all standard edition. We can see that this database has got some locking problem. So we can see we're getting up to 30 sessions locked. So if we look at this period, we can see all these updates that are running and locking themselves. What we can actually do is, if we look at the 1 second view, we can see the locking history and the locks held at that point. So if we want to know why we had 60 sessions locking, we can see our root blocker, and it was the table lock it had, which was used. Okay guys, if we carry on still having a look at the table locks, so we can see that it's this session which is our root blocker. We can see by selecting values, we can see the percentage that we were blocked, or the root blocker, the event breakdown, SQL that it was running. But if we go back here, we want to see what the root blocker was doing. We can see it was, the root blocker was running this 9FPW, and if we look at the locks held by this session, we can see that it's got a lock on the object lock me, and we can see that it's a transaction exclusive with an undo slot and the sequence number. And so if we wanted to have a look what the SQL was, we can see that we're just locking. We're locking a row. An interesting thing about this session and what we captured here, this is actually an idle session. Normally you wouldn't capture an idle session, but this is an idle session that's holding locks, so we can catch it and see root diagnosis of lock problems. This database is slightly more interesting for the history view because things change. We can see that the different periods when our lock started up, and so we can investigate any locking problem with all the locks held all the way back for days. We can see what locks each session had, whether it was idle or not. So if we get the data up when it was a root blocker, we can see what SQL was running when it was a root blocker, and what locks it's held at that time. If we look at user-defined locks, for example, this is when you use dbms lock to set your well, we can see what the only SQL that was running. Again, if we have a little look at some of the history, let's look at a busy time. We can see we're up to 40 sessions. Again, we can see what the root blocker is, and looking at this, we can see that we got our blocking lock is on a user-defined lock type. So we can see that we've got some application user-defined locking, which was it's one type of locks. We can see the traffic light change in there. If we go back to actually the swing bench, we can have a look at the other type of locks. Okay, if we're carrying on, we looked at user-defined locks and we've looked at table locks. If we go back to the swing bench and we look at the 2-session swing bench, we can also see locks by sys. So we can see our blocked session. It's blocked by, well, we've got the root blocker here. You can see that was an idle blocker, but we can actually see that it was logwriter that was blocking, and we can see details of logwriter and what it was doing. Some information which is often quite hard to collect, but we can see that logwriter was the actual blocking session there. And again, we can see in these ones who was the root blocker and what they were doing. So here are some of the dashboards I set up, trying to show some of the different things. We can also have all our databases in a view. So we're just looking at the traffic lights here. We can expand them all. So we've got a view of just the activity viewers, and we can see immediately across our whole database estate how they're all performing and what kind of weights they're on. If we see anything that we wanted to have a look at which was out of the ordinary, I mean, for example, we can just highlight that bit, and then we get the drill down instantly on what was running at that period that we just selected. Let's just get that running again. Again, we can look at the 24-hour view if we wanted to know. We can shrink them all back up. If we wanted to look how the dashboards are done, we can see how we've added our databases. This is just database information. If we want to look at the dashboards, we can add and take out from our databases. Other things that maybe I'd show as well. Another interesting thing that we have is we have the size details of the database. We can look to see what items were in the databases, and we also have a history of the sizing, and so we can see that this is only keeping 2 hours worth of data, but we can see if it changed over the 2 hours. And again, we can look at any segment, see the size and see how it changed over time. And all this information is all displayed. All the information for this puts no stored objects or data on the database you're monitoring. So there's and you only need a small set of privileges, and you get all this monitoring then, and historical. Runs on SE, XE, Enterprise without diagnostic pack, tuning pack. Full visibility and visualization of performance load on your database or on any of your databases at any time. Okay, thanks.